Living the Science of Mind, page 47, the story of growth. The Bible symbolizes the spiritual evolution of humanity, beginning in the Old Testament and culminating in the life and teaching of Jesus the Christ. As we examine the spiritual symbology of the Bible, we should realize that as it tells the story of a race of people, it also presents the story of every person's life, yours and mine. The Bible starts with the fundamental premise that God, the universal creative spirit, is present everywhere and is within humanity ourselves. To this concept is added the great law of cause and effect. Then the Bible presents the idea that people are created free, with the possibility of limitless expansion, and let alone to discover ourselves. During this process of self-discovery, a person brings upon themselves, through the operation of the law of mind, the experiences they image in their thoughts. We have, on one hand, the evolution of the individual life under the guidance of divine providence, which leads to harmony. In contrast, there is a freedom to live under the false guidance of a sense of being separated from good, which leads to disaster and chaos. But always the Bible holds before us the great promise of the final redemption of humanity through understanding the law of our being and our relationship to the divine spirit. It shows us that there is always something at the innermost depths of our being which never completely loses a sense of its spiritual nature. Even in the midst of the confusion that follows the misuse of the law by the children of Israel, they produced the greatest line of spiritual prophets the world has ever known. These prophets were the ones who always remembered who they really were. The era of the prophets cannot be divorced from the kingdom of Israel, its development and rise to power, and its division and dispersal. Nor can the kingdom of Israel be separated from the kingdom which each one of us represents. We can relate the development of the kingdom of Israel to the integration of a personality or the coming into wholeness of any one being. When the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, they were an unorganized people. They lived scattered tribes, warring with other desert tribes. Necessity for self-preservation caused them to band together into greater colonies, and this brought forth the need for organized leadership. Here, we are introduced to one of the factors that made Israel a great nation. The first leaders of the children of Israel were spiritual rather than political or social leaders. The spiritual impulse was fundamental to the nature of their being. Judges were selected to rule over the people, not judges in the sense that we think of for our courts of law, but spiritual judges who represented the divine law, the will of God or Jehovah. The spiritual law was, in fact, the civil law of the Hebrew people. As the nation began to take form, it passed from religious into civil leadership, and the kingdom of Israel was established. But we remember that it was a spiritual leader, the prophet Samuel, who raised Saul, the first king, to his throne. And Saul, under divine guidance, developed the kingdom of Israel to a power undreamed of. He organized his people so that they worked together effectively in commerce, agriculture, industry, and international relations. When David ascended to the throne, he was anointed by Samuel the prophet and undertook to continue the development of the kingdom under divine guidance. David brought a quality of love to his reign that complemented the organizational ability and the intellect of Saul. And the kingdom of Israel rose to even greater heights. David's son succeeded him on the throne, and Solomon inherited by far the richest and most powerful kingdom of the world at that time. In the early part of his reign, Solomon became noted for his great wisdom and understanding. But later, to satisfy his increasing love of luxury and power, it was necessary for him to increase taxation and conscript more and more slave labor. His people began to grow restless under this oppression, and eventually a segment of them rebelled and seceded from the kingdom. The great nation was divided. Here is the story of a man who, when his thought was centered on God, erected the great temple which so perfectly symbolized the meaning of life and the relationship between the individual and the universal. And then, when he lost the spiritual meaning of the temple he had built and became engrossed in material force, both his wisdom and his power deserted him. Solomon began to worship two gods, the God of temporal power and the God of his ancestors, the one and only true God. This marked the beginning of this disintegration of a mighty kingdom. For hundreds of years following the fall of the kingdom of Israel, the Hebrew people were subjected to every indignity known to the human family. But as great as their plight was, never were they without a prophet of the Lord to keep hope alive, to keep before them the promise of a Messiah who would lead them out of their captivity. There was always an Isaiah to say, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Isaiah 2:4. And in his prophecy concerning the coming of Christ, "And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the love of the Lord." Isaiah 11:2. There was always a Hosea to say, "Come and let us return unto the Lord, for it hath torn and it will heal us. It hath smitten and it will bind us up." Hosea 6:1. And there was always a Micah to say, "But thou, Bethlehem, though thou be little among the thousands of Judea, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. And this man shall be the peace, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces." Micah 5:2 and 5. All of the prophets who arose during this period of captivity prophesied the final emancipation of the children of Israel from their bondage through a return to the true knowledge of the kingdom of God and the final triumph of spiritual power. They all pointed to the fact that somewhere in human experience, some person would arise who would completely reveal the divine nature and the divine sonship. Every person is a nation unto themselves, a nation inhabited by many thoughts, feelings, appetites, and talents. Every person is a nation of consciousness. All too often, like the children of Israel, we find it easy to build golden calves and reach with lustful hands to grasp the illusion of temporal power. It is easy for us to forget that there is a supreme ruler at the center of the nation of ourselves, whose sovereignty is fixed and loved and enthroned in the sonship of God. It is only as we turn our thoughts away from this spiritual sovereignty that our faculties and energies become dispersed. This makes us a weakened nation, subject to the invasion of every fear, doubt, disease, and temptation that presents itself at the borders of our experience. But, as with the children of Israel, there is always a prophet in our own minds that gives us hope, consolation, and promise in the knowledge that life can never destroy itself and that truth crushed to earth shall rise again. This prophet is our own soul, which eternally proclaims the Messiah, even though we may be lost in a wilderness of our own false concepts. We should not forget that the very power which created this wilderness is the power that builds the highway for the remnant to return to the Holy Lands. It is the personal application of these great historic symbols presented in the Old Testament in which we are particularly interested. For the ancient race of the children of Israel has long since departed, but the lesson is as new as the latest invention. Let us each be sure then that the voice of the prophet within does not go unheard or unheeded. Let us right now be still and listen as the Son of God within us proclaims the glory of its kingdom. Let this kingdom be real to us in a very practical way. Let us know right now that we are established in the kingdom of health, happiness, and wholeness because we are established in the kingdom of God.